So on Monday, we talked about why you're writing, and we talked about what your goal is. Well, today we're going to dive into some practical tips for how you can start building your habit. If you haven't already, go back and watch that Monday video or read the blog, because it's very important that you understand your why and you define your what before you get into trying to build your habit. I guarantee you it is going to be way harder to maintain a habit if you don't have the proper motivation and you don't have clarity on where you're trying to go. But if you do have those two things, then this video is hopefully going to give you some practical tips on how you can start building your habit. Habit formation is one of my favorite subjects ever, so if I nerd out a little bit, please forgive me. If you want a really good book on this, James Clear's Atomic Habits is the gold standard. He has just an unbelievable amount of value packed into a very, very digestible package. And even if you're not a big reader, you can get it on audio. It is just unbelievably fantastic. In fact, I'll put a link to it in the description below. I definitely recommend everybody read that book. To get us started, the first practical tip that I'm going to give you is to write your habit stack. Let me first define what a habit stack is. The reality is that the majority of the things that we do in life are actually habits, and they exist in what's called a habit stack. That is, when I finish doing this, I do that. So for instance, when I finish putting on my right shoe, I put on my left shoe. Maybe there's a bench or a chair that you always sit in to put on your shoes. If you start paying attention, you might find that you put on your shoes exactly the same way every time. This is a habit stack. The same thing is true for any motion that is repeated sort of unconsciously. And if we examine our life, we often find that we have these hidden habit stacks everywhere. Well, for your writing habit, you want to build a habit stack specifically for writing. So my habit stack looks a little bit like this. I wake up when my alarm goes off. I get out of bed immediately without snoozing. After I've silenced my alarm, I go downstairs and I start my coffee. While my coffee is brewing, I get my journal and I journal one page. After I'm finished with my single page of journaling, I get my coffee from the coffee pot and I go downstairs. Once I'm downstairs, I turn on the light, I sit down at my computer, and I begin working. The same thing happens every single morning. I don't even have to think about it. It's just unconscious. But what you'll notice is that when I repeated my habit stack initially, I gave you every single step along the way, all of the little motions that I do. And that's actually really important. This idea of after I'm done this, I do this creates a sense of momentum in us. And when we write it down by hand, it's ingrained in us even more. So that's what I want you to do. I want you to write your habit stack by hand. Now, if you don't already have a habit stack, don't worry. You can just write one down and then try to do it. Now, this brings us to our next point, which is start small. Make sure that as you are trying to develop this habit stack, you are taking really small steps at a time. One of the biggest problems with habit formation is that we just try to do too much. I didn't build my writing habit stack all at once. In fact, you know what I started with? Get up when my alarm goes off. And for like 10 to 20 days, all I did was focus on getting up as soon as my alarm went off. And that meant feet on the floor, butt out of the bed. Once it was ingrained in me that I didn't snooze, I didn't turn my alarm off and go back to sleep, well, then now I'm up. Okay, so now what? Well, the next obvious thing was turn on the coffee pot to get my cup of coffee going and then journal. Instead of saying I'm going to journal for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, I just said I'm going to journal one page. The pages in my journal aren't huge, and so that's not an intimidating size of paper for me. And I did that over and over and over again. And then once I had that ingrained, I added my next step. Take my coffee cup downstairs to my office, turn on the light, and start work. And that took me even longer to add to my habit stack. But because I was taking these small incremental steps, nothing ever felt like a major stretch. It just feels normal. It feels right. And that's because I've spent time intentionally tuning that habit stack. And that's what I want you to do. I want you to write out your entire habit stack, the habit stack you want, the ideal version of it, and then I want you to divide it into pieces. Take it one step at a time and practice each little bit one after the other. You'll notice that I'm talking a lot about how to build your habit stack to get you started. And I'm not talking a lot about how to do the actual writing. And that's because beginning is everything. If you can get yourself to the point where you start working, where you start writing, you'll figure out the rest. You don't need a habit for when you are writing. You need discipline for that. And that's a different video. No, what you need is a habit to get you started. If you're a writer, then you know very well that when you sit down and you start the words moving, more will come. It might be a struggle, it might be difficult, but as long as you stick with it, they will come. So what you need to focus on is making sure you are getting started. And that's where this habit stack comes in. That's where taking these small steps comes in. I've shared my habit stack with you. If you have any questions about it, definitely leave them in the comments. And if you have a habit stack that you're working on, let me know what it is. I'd love to hear how you are arranging your time in order to get yourself started.